So yeah, my name is Holden. My preferred pronouns are she or her. I'm a developer advocate at Google, which means that I think Google is the best place to run whatever your workloads are. More seriously, I work on open source big data there. So I work on Spark, but I also work on a bunch of other things. And I'm on the Spark PMC. And I contribute to a bunch of other projects as well. And I've been at a bunch of places, including IBM and Databricks. I'm a co-author of 2 Spark books, High Performance Spark and Learning Spark. And I think High Performance Spark, I got a much better royalty deal on. And so it's the book that I recommend to everyone. You can follow me on Twitter, and SlideShare is where these slides will end up. And actually, right before this, and I should have updated this slide, I did a live stream of a code review. So if you go and find my YouTube, you can find live streamed code reviews and recorded live streamed code reviews if you're ever like having difficulty falling asleep or just want to learn more about the open source process. In addition to who I am professionally, I'm trans, queer, Canadian, and part of the leather community. This is not particularly related to Spark. There is really no secret Canadian tools that we've been hiding from you. Although there is a secret Canadian, never mind. I think they're recording the audio, but there's not secret, but a group of Canadians who help each other debug their Spark problems because otherwise life is just way too hard. So you should find a group of people that you like and have them help you debug your Spark problems. And part of the other community. Yeah, and so I think, especially for those of us who are planning to do ML work, it's useful and important to think about the diversity of people that we have working on our problems. If we look around and it looks like everyone working on solving these problems is from the same background, there's a good chance that not all of the sort of ideas are going to be brought to the table, and you'll just do a really good job of recreating yesterday's biases today, but with data, which doesn't make it better. No, it just makes it worse. So try not to be that person. Okay, cool. This is normally where I would introduce my co-speaker. I really wish she was here. She's not. She was organizing the Apache Beam Summit earlier this week and just ended up way too tired to make it today. And so unfortunately, I had to cut a few corners because she told me yesterday. And so I was just like, oh, that's exciting. And so some small things were cut, and my apologies if I ended up cutting the parts that you were most interested in. And there is cat picture reuse. I know that many of you come to my talks just for the fresh cat pictures, and I apologize sincerely that that's not going to be able to be met today. So if you're interested, the slides from today's talk will be at this link, along with the code. I'll post the notebook and the slides right afterwards. And yesterday's talk, if you were there, is the validating pipelines one, and there's that bit.ly link there too. Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm hoping you're all nice people. I'm assuming since it's day 2, you have at least 1 day of Spark underneath your belt. If you don't, that's okay. You might be a little bit jaded. How many people here would describe themselves as optimistic when they receive a Spark error message? There are 6 people, and for some reason they're not all in the front row, which is kind of what I was expecting. Anyways, yeah, so you may be just really wishing that machine learning is going to solve this part of our job so that we don't have to do it. But there's a good chance that you're here because you don't think it's going to work either. Yeah, okay, cool. So we're going to explore the Spark mailing list together, and yes, even the user list. We're going to talk about my desire to be lazy. And the other one is, how many people have heard the rumor that Sean Owen is actually a robot? That's 1 person. Okay, or 2. So Sean Owen is a really amazing person. Oh, and the photographer is leaving before I had a chance to put on my unicorn hood. Oh, so sad. But you all will get to see my amazing birthday unicorn horn. But yes, so Sean Owen is amazing, and in fact works so hard that many people suspect him of actually being not just one robot, but a collection of robots. But I assure you, I've met him in the flesh, and he appears to not be a robot, or at least a very advanced robot. We'll take a look at the theory that maybe we could build that robot army, followed by the depressing realization that the robot army is better served by heuristics. And heuristics are just a fancy way of saying PCRE and truth table. And it's sad, but it's OK. So why does my employer care about Spark? Oh, and I didn't fix this slide since yesterday. Oops. Oh well. We have a hooted Spark Hadoop solution, one of the finest. We run spell check on our documentation, but not our slides. We have hosted pipeline management tools, and we like to be good open source community members, I'm told. And there's probably other reasons that my employer cares about Spark, but I don't go to all of my meetings, so this is kind of the ones that I know about. OK, let's talk about the Spark mailing list. How many people are subscribed to the user list? OK, keep your hands up if you read every message. All right, that's no one. OK, how many people are subscribed to Dev? Keep your hands up if you read every message. Do you really? OK, no, but do you read every message? I do. OK, so we have one really dedicated community member, and thank you for serving as the substitute robot for when we're too busy to make robots. OK, and how many people, is there anyone who's really active on the Stack Overflow here? Hey, thank you. OK, and there's also books and other stuff. I think books are great, and you should buy several copies of all of them. Preferably with a corporate credit card, and then just don't return them. OK, so, oh, I was going to have you try and guess this number. OK, so I mean, this is not the worst number of unanswered posts. This doesn't mean that like someone answered it well. This means like someone replied to the message, possibly with, oh, or send me a stack trace, which there's actually we'll talk about the clusters later. But this is a little sad, and we could think that those 8,536 messages could belong to community members who might not feel super welcome and warm and have their problem solved, and might get kind of sad and leave and start using other tools. And that would be very sad, because then my book revenues would decline. So we can't have that situation. This is clearly bad. At least someone should be replying to every message and saying, have you bought Holden's book? So there's opportunities for improvement here. OK, Stack Overflow. Yeah, so it turns out that we're getting a lot more questions on Stack Overflow lately. Not necessarily answers, but let's focus on the good thing. More questions means more opportunities to provide answers. So that's good. And yeah, I did this with BigQuery, sorry. OK, and one of the nice things about Stack Overflow is that it looks like people actually see these answers to a degree. One of them, their top one, has 2,000 views. And that's exciting. How many people feel like they can find answers by searching on the Spark user list? Yeah, you're not alone, and that's maybe a thing that we could work on with robots. OK, outstanding PRs, everything is terrible. But one of the things is maybe if the committers and wonderful community members spent less time answering mailing list posts, we'd have more time to review people's code, and then maybe things would move ahead faster. It's also possible that instead we would get lives and pick up hobbies. So there's no guarantee that like if we solve this problem, Spark will actually get better, but it might. OK, so how can we handle this? We could try and get more humans. So all of you here who came here to learn about machine learning and robots could instead answer random strangers' questions on the internet. How many people are excited about that? You and I should be friends. Let's talk later. Don't run away after this talk. OK. Anyways, OK. We could work harder, but that is unlikely to happen. and will probably just result in us burning out. And we could also just do nothing and hope people buy more support contracts. As someone who once worked at a vendor that sold support contracts, that doesn't seem like the worst idea, but I don't sell support contracts right now, so that's not very good. Or we can make robots. Robots! It's also hard, but it's a much cooler hard, right? If you go to people and you tell them that you spent your day building an advanced AI system to help people with their Spark errors, they're like, that sounds really cool. And if you're like, I spent the past 3 weeks answering every post I could find on the user list, they're like, do you need a drink? What's wrong? Is everything okay at home? And like, that's not great. I would much rather have people be excited about my work as opposed to concerned for my personal well-being. Okay, so maybe, and I'm just going to throw this out there might be some common Spark errors. How many people have had a Java out-of-memory exception? Okay, I should have asked this the other way around. How many people have not had a Java out-of-memory exception? Do you use Spark? Sort of. Okay. No, I mean, that's honest. Maybe you have the magical, Canadian garbage collector that I joke about, and I need to come and steal it from you. Okay. Application memory overhead exceeded, et cetera, et cetera. So the TLDR of this is, there are probably some common things, right? We've all experienced application memory overhead exceeded. Probably many of us experience serialization exceptions, and maybe if we can cluster the messages, we can help have robots answer some of those 8,000 messages that no one's bothered responding to. Okay, cool. So yeah, maybe robots can help, right? And we all love the experience of when we use robots to answer questions, right? We all love calling our bank and getting press 1 for the accounting department. Press 2, no, do people not have the same response when they call banks here? Do you get people? Or are you just saying that you don't love it? You're not excited to talk to robots? Oh, interesting. I always thought robots were really cool. Okay. Well, I mean, if I was to start a Spark consulting company, it would definitely have a press 1 for if you have an out-of-memory exception, press 2 if you're running Python, and we just go from there, right? And the IVR tree would eventually just be like, and please enter your credit card number. Have you considered increasing the amount of memory on your executor, and then it would hang up. But after we charge you first. And so that's okay. And interestingly enough, some people have actually used Spark to build recommender systems for knowledge-based articles. Not for Spark knowledge-based articles, but for commercially, well, I mean, possibly for Spark knowledge-based articles, but the ones that I've seen have done it for more sort of traditional commercial software products. And you can actually see this in some of the commercial help desk products. Okay, so if maybe we can cluster our mailing list posts and we can find the Spark errors that are kind of similar, and then we can start sending them that automatic robot response if no one answers, right? We had 4 common errors, so we could try building 4 clusters. Does that sound good to people? I'm getting some nods. Okay. Okay, let's do that. We'll just do this really simply. Spark is amazing. It has machine learning, at least 6 machine learnings. We'll set our seed to 42 for good luck, because it's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And we'll add some extra special UDFs, like does this have an exception in the task? Is it a Python or a Java stack trace that the person has posted? We'll help our clustering algorithm out a little bit, because if we just did hashing TF on Java stack traces, we might lose a little bit of information. Okay, it doesn't quite fit on one slide, right? I can't do word count if it's under 14, but it's close enough, and I can have my pipeline, and I'll do my data prep separately in case, just on the off chance, our number of k equals 4 was not the best guess. Just a little bit of foreshadowing there. So we're going to run this, and how many people here know of the Ford Pinto? You told me more people were going to know about the Ford Pinto. I asked yesterday. Okay, anyways, so for those of you who know about the Ford Pinto, it catches on fire a lot. And that's going to be what happens with k equals 4. But, okay, do you know about Northern Rock? Is that Is that a thing, or did they just trick me about this yesterday too? Okay, someone told me this was like an infamous UK bank failure and it would be super popular in London, or maybe unpopular. Anyways, our clustering is going to go as well as Northern Rock may or may not have done, depending on how much I was tricked yesterday. And so let's take a look at some of the emails from each of the clusters. Oh, well, our first problem is that it turns out everything is in cluster 0, except for one element in cluster 1. So maybe k equals 4 was not the most solid choice, right? Yeah, so we've got one item which didn't end up in cluster 0. How many people saw that coming? One person. Okay. The other option is I'm losing the audience, but that's fine too. Okay, so that part didn't go very well. Well, what about if we've got 4 common errors in 4 different programming languages, and we can try 4 times 4 as the number of clusters. And then we get 159 messages grouped into these clusters. It's not looking very good either. I mean, if I subtracted 159 from that 8,000, it's not really going to make that much of a difference. So what about if we picked k in a different way? This is also a pretty bad way of picking k, but it looks like around 200 something starts to happen. Let's try 200, right? It's not that big a number, and the other option was taking the square root of the number of messages. But that would have been much less exciting. So we're going to try k equals 200. And we can start looking at some of the records that we get back in the different groups. One of the groups that we get back is group 73. And one of the messages that we get in this is something about Hive, and people want ACID support in Hive on Spark. This is going to go pretty badly. But, it's clearly a problem about Hive and PySpark, and I would say mismatched expectations. But it's hard for a computer to judge mismatched expectations. But maybe we have a cluster of Hive records. Okay, this one, I didn't want you to be able to read it, so I didn't change the font size. But we can see here the problem is something about S3, I don't know. Oh, right, okay, yes. The part that we can see is there's a Java stack trace here, and it's going into the file system layer. And so that's cool. That might actually be a common sort of thing where our input has problems. How many people have had problems with their input data in Spark? That's pretty much everyone, but most people don't want to raise their hand all the way up. So this could actually represent a good cluster of errors. And I want to point out, I didn't just look at a single record for each one. I looked at like at least 5 records for each cluster, so it's pretty scientific. Because engineering induction starts at 3, and sometimes I didn't get the answer I wanted, so I kept going until I got to 5. Okay, cool. And yeah, okay, we see, oh, I didn't change the numbers between these two. I meant to. This is actually a different cluster. I don't remember which cluster it is. Okay, we'll pretend this slide wasn't there. Okay, here's another cluster. And what was this one? Standalone Spark, input of 468 megs. There's another I/O exception. No, it throws an I/O exception. Man. Does anyone want to guess what this error is about? Because I don't remember. Anyone? Anyone? Okay, it's all right. I have another slide where I wrote a summary of what these are. So here's another error message, super exciting. We can all read the Spark mailing list together, or we can go look at this summary slide. Group 74 turned out to mostly just be people answering people's questions. Group 53 was pretty much Hive went boom, which is not super surprising. Group 155 was not Hive, exceptions inside of map partitions. It's probably your code's fault, right? Like you were doing something inside of a map function, it went boom, you should go look at the code that you wrote that's inside of your map function. We had another group which was people leaving like questions and comments on PRs on the dev list. Group 183 was streaming went boom. And then group 0 was Oh. And group 0 was still largely overrepresented. But we actually had a bunch of interesting clusters come out. These are the ones which I looked at enough records to be relatively confident in what they were about. Unfortunately, I probably can't use these clusters on their own. This probably isn't good enough to build my robot replacement for Sean Owen, who is allegedly a robot. And people would probably get kind of upset if there was a bot on the Spark mailing list that just emailed back, like, it looks like you have an out-of-memory exception. Have you tried increasing your cluster size? You know, as much as I want to build a modern-day Clippy and deploy it on a mailing list, I'm pretty sure it's not that hard to figure out where I live, and I also don't want to get murdered. So really, really not that great. There are other more reasonable options. One would be we could do this clustering, and then if people like don't get an answer, we could be like, hey, looks like no one cares. Have you looked at these other people who have similar problems to you? Maybe one of them has an answer. And it would be even better if we pointed them to one which someone had replied to. That might make them happier, rather than just being like, it looks like no one cares. Here's another person that no one cares about. Sorry, question, not person. But you know, that could be better. The other option is I could trick humans, and there seem to be a large number of humans here, into looking at the suggestions from the computer and picking one from a drop-down list and being like, yeah, this actually was an out-of-memory exception. You're not saying it's not an out-of-memory exception. What's going on, right? Because this turns out hashing TF isn't perfect. Who knew? Okay, right. So there's a bunch of other things that we could do. One of the things that I wanted to do was there's the TF GitHub summarizer, which I wanted to plug into this because it does a really good job of reducing the size of my input text into a much more condensed vector. And we could use this to try and get narrower sort of clusters. It's trained on different data, but I think it could be pretty solid, and we could use this. The other one is Spark is not really a search engine. And it turns out that probably what most people actually need is a search engine, right? If we go look at Stack Overflow, the discoverability of the answers makes a huge difference. So we could try and make the mailing list more discoverable and not have cool machine learning problems to solve, but it might be more useful. But it depends on what your goals are in life. If you want to be like useful, we could use Elasticsearch. If you want to get promoted, we could use transfer learning with TensorFlow. Either way is fine. It's no judgment call. We could also hire some people on Fiverr. My favorite place to get logos designed when my budget is about $10. And we could assume that the same people who design my logos for under $10 are also pretty good at reading code and have them just label a bunch of data for us. Or I could label data, but that's a lot less fun. Or we could give up. That one's pretty exciting too. And then we can go for a drink. And there's a final one, which is actually pretty interesting. Paco did a really interesting look at the network's effects on the Spark mailing list. And it turns out that the graph algorithms actually do a lot better than clustering for figuring out people who we could route questions to. However, I found out from the time that I deployed this little helpful GitHub bot to route PRs to people, it turns out people get really upset when you route things to them without telling them first, or sorry, asking. And so we would definitely have to get consent from the people who would be getting a lot of requests routed their way. Otherwise, once again, that problem where it's not too difficult to figure out where I live in San Francisco, and I like wearing unicorn dresses and not getting stabbed, comes into play. Okay, and fundamentally, actually, what we probably really need is Sparklint and Dr. Elephant. If we take a look at this, a lot of people do actually post useful information. There's different clusters where people have actually posted their log messages, and clusters where people have done a good job of actually like posting their log messages and stack traces. And if we fed those to Sparklint, it could actually probably do a better job than any of our cool machine learning stuff, because it had a whole bunch of human time put into it to come up with good heuristics. And so the main thing that the clusters tell us is that we shouldn't be solving this with clustering. OK. On that note, I'd like to tell you about my upcoming book, Distributed Computing for Kids, an introduction to Apache Spark for ages 8 and up. If you're interested in introducing your children, someone else's children, with their permission into the wonderful world of distributed systems, I would encourage you to give me your email address, which I will use in GDPR compliant ways to contact you with relevant commercial information that is not unsolicited. OK, and you should also buy this book. You should buy several copies of this book, and that's pretty much it. OK, thanks, bye.
We have.
If you could pretend to be happy for a second and not run away. Oh, oof. No, running away person. Ah, damn it, it was worth a shot. I need to take a picture of the crowd so that my boss continues to pay me money. Yes, happy talk, happy talk. Maybe not that side of the room. We'll do just this part, and we'll pretend that other part is just, we'll just crop it at the part where it's like 10%. Sorry, y'all. OK.
We have time for one more question.
Yay! One question.
Anybody?
Yay! Oh, you're the person who knew that k was equal to 4 was a bad idea. This bodes poorly.
So rather than clustering, have you tried some sort of like train a similarity score matrix or something along those lines to kind of just create a recommendation of like the top end things that have a high similarity score or something like that?
No.
Well, if you do that, if you answer like this, we have time for one more question.
I mean, that sounds like a good idea, but my co-presenter bailed, so I was just like, OK, cool. We're just going to get this shit done. So my plan to explore other things beyond the very direct scope of what I promised was cut.
One more?
Yeah. Does anyone want to ask a second question? Or is it like Bud Light Lime time?
OK, it's lime time, I suppose.
It's Bud Light Lime. Yay! I win drinking.
Thank you, Holden.